ladies and gentlemen, let's also move forward towards our next segment of the program. And this time we're talking about creating sustainable businesses. Well, yes, ladies and gentlemen, this time we'll do so in the form of a panel discussion. And trust me, this panel will be featuring some stalwart of speakers from across the industries who are going to come together and share their best practices when it comes to creating sustainable businesses. One of our first speakers who are joining us would be Dr. Alka Mithal, who is the first ever woman functional director of ONGC in its 65 years of history. In fact, she assumed the charge of Director HR in 2018 and with taking over additional charge of Chairman and Managing Director of ONGC in January 2022. Dr. Mittal has become the first woman to head one of India's most valuable oil and gas public sector enterprises. Moving on, we also have our next speaker joining us in, another prolific speaker and a leader. We have with us none other than Arundhati Bhattacharya, who is the chairperson and CEO at Salesforce. In fact, at Salesforce, while we know that she's driving a gamut of initiatives, we also know that Arundhati Bhattacharya is also the chairperson, and besides being the chief executive officer for Salesforce, she's also been overseeing the growth strategy of the company, playing an integral role in defining Salesforce relationship with the ecosystem of customers, partners, and community across India. As we move forward, let's also bring on board our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, Jamshyd and Godrej, Chairman and Managing Director, Godrej and Boyce. Ladies and gentlemen, as we talk about Mr. Jamshyd, we are definitely reminded of the fact that he is someone who has spearheaded some very, very important initiatives as well. And he's also the former chairman of Ananta Aspen Center, which was previously known as the Aspen Institute India. And ladies and gentlemen, with his amazing expertise and experience, he has managed to also ensure that the Godrej Group, as we all know, are the leaders in home appliances, consumer durables, or for that matter, office equipment, and at the same time, consumer products as well as services. So it would be befitting to gather his inputs in this very, very amazing panel discussion. As we move ahead, let me also bring on board our next speaker. And we have with us none other than Naveen Munjal, who's a managing director, Hero Electric. Looks like this is where we're shifting the gears when we have Mr. Munjal joining us in, because as an entrepreneur, having built the Hero Electric brand into a leading manufacturer and a market leader in the EV two-wheeler market in India, he's also widely recognized in shaping the Indian electric two-wheeler industry, as well as his contributions to various forums in the EV sphere, both in India as well as globally. With that, let's also move on to our next speaker. And as I mentioned, they are all leaders, and it's only befitting to gather their inputs, especially when we're talking about creating sustainable businesses. Then there's definitely one person that we can't miss out. We're talking about Suneeta Reddy, Managing Director, Apollo Hospitals, a member of the founding family. She joined the enterprise in the year 1989. And since then, as the finance director of the company, she has spearheaded several fundraising and investment decisions that have also played a key role in the group's sustained growth and profitability. And on that note, while we do have such amazing speakers joining us in, it is also time to introduce someone who is spearheading this entire panel discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, the one person who is very apt in asking the right kind of questions to ensure that we get the right kind of answers. We have with us none other than Namrata Rana, Director Strategy and Brand, Futurescape. She helps companies and foundations build sustainable experiences, and she's also visiting faculty at IIM Udaipur and India Ambassador of University of Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. So on that note, it's time to bring on board all of our speakers here and time to deep dive into this amazing discussion around creating sustainable businesses.
Good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to be here as part of the Global Business Summit. This year's Global Business Summit talks about geostrategy, economics, health and the environment, and digital inclusion and acceleration. And all these things are an integral part of business today. And the biggest disruptor in business at the moment is climate change. The biggest disruption that we have seen since the Industrial Revolution is happening now. And digitization and climate change are now converging together to create a unique confluence of forces that are impacting businesses all around us. Specifically now that after the global business transitions are happening, and the COP26 happened just very recently, we want to ask the business leaders that are here today with all of us that how is it that they see the world around us, the great resurgence that is happening at the moment in terms of business transitions and the post pandemic recovery. How is climate change, how is sustainability, and all the conversations that we are having on ESG, how are they going to impact all of us in terms of the Indian economy, the world economy, and their very own businesses? The first person I want to call in today to talk about this is Mr. Jamshyd Godrej. Sir, what are your thoughts on this? How do you see the future and this sustainability transition happening?
Thank you. Well, as this transition has been in progress for some time, but the recent COP26 in Glasgow has given a lot of impetus to everyone in the world because world leaders came forward and stepped up to what is necessary to be done. I think the part of the problem of tackling climate change is that it's a slow-moving target. It's not like COVID, which needed rapid response. And so when we talk of climate change, we've got to have policies and programs that are for the long term. I think you have to look at the change that's going to take place in a way that will get affected over decades, because we have been told clearly by the science that if we are not doing this, then by the turn of the century, the weather would become rather catastrophic. So I think the most important point is that people know that they have to now decarbonize, they have to reduce their footprint, whether it's energy, it's water, it's waste, etc. And they have to find the connect with their businesses. I think every business, has a footprint, and how do we measure that footprint? One nice way that's been done by the Footprint Network is to give a date in the year when we are told that for every country of the world, they have already exhausted their biocapacity. It has already happened for 3 countries in Europe. And I think that the important point for everyone and policymakers to realize is that the sooner we get policy in place that encourages the right behavior, I think the sooner you will be able to move towards that goal.
Thank you so much, Mr. Godrej. Alka ji, your thoughts on this? You're part of the oil and gas industry. The biggest transition is happening in your sector, in your industry. Not only is it imperative that you reduce your own impacts, but how is it that you are transitioning in terms of products and services to create a net zero transition?
Thank you, Namrata, and my warm greetings to all the fellow panelists who are there, very distinguished panelists, I would say. ESG is getting becoming more and more important, the ESG considerations for the oil and gas sector, and definitely in the present scenario where we are looking at the impact our actions have on the climate change, and we are also looking at how we can mitigate the same. So while we are trying to reduce the GHG emissions, which is a priority for us, and we are also making sure that we are more responsible in our water use, because our industry is such that water is required, water is used in good volumes, I would say, and also the disposal of our effluent that is there is again an area of concern. So lots of research and development is going into this domain, and at ONGC we have 12 centers of excellence which are focusing on different parts of our activities, and there continuously our R&D personnel are researching and finding out what are the good practices that could be adopted. They are not only doing this, they are benchmarking with others in the globally, and they are trying to have the best of practices there for us. So while we are doing it, we are also doing great deal of research in the area of renewables. We have a ONGC Energy Center, which focuses on what are the renewable options which can be there for the country, because we all appreciate that India is a growing economy, and We are the third largest consumer of energy. The demand for energy is going up as we are growing. Therefore, while we can't wish away the oil and gas activities, we really have to make them as safe, as less, I would say, costly to the nation, as well as far as the climate part of it is concerned, and the impact on the environment is concerned. So while ONGC is also ensuring that the pressure on ESG is taken care of by way of our positive, clean, green initiatives, we are also looking at how we transition towards cleaner energy. And for that, we have had tie-ups with different organizations globally. We have tied up with ISOR in Iceland for having geothermal energy tapping in Ladakh area, Leh Ladakh area, and that initiative I think will take shape in this particular year itself, 2022, and we are waiting with excitement about how we are able to make headway there. So this particular initiative will be of great support for the Indian Army, which is there in that remote area, rough terrain. And while we are doing this, ONGC has also been at the forefront in addressing these issues and continues to undertake several initiatives for reducing GHG emissions and focusing on improved energy efficiency. So for that, as I mentioned, our researchers are on the job, and we have not only gone up to research stage, we have also implemented some of these green technologies. We have been actually very steadily increasing our footprints in renewable energy, and that together with checks on undue toll on the environment by way of our activities in the oil and gas business is going to actually help us in reducing our carbon footprint. And post COVID-19, we are actively exploring various avenues for ESG investing for the long-term returns alongside our traditional financial metrics, in keeping with the triple bottom line approach, I would say. So on social front, on the health front, also we have been taking care, and by very nature of our business, we are present in the remotest corners of the country, and therefore the kind of impact we can have on the improving well-being and community welfare in our respective areas of operations is also going to help those areas in the times to come. And I just always quote one example. You know, if you visit any of the ONGC drilling rig or installation, you will find it standing amidst perfectly green and lush green fields. So this shows that the way we are managing our activities with the latest of technological initiatives, we are able to manage the impact of our activities on the environment, the ecosystem in which we are. And that is what I feel is of extreme importance to us. While we keep contributing towards the energy security of the nation, we have to look at the need of the world for having clean, green energy. So a mix of this is what ONGC is targeting and is working towards, and all ONGCians, 27,000 plus, are focused on that. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. It's interesting to hear the spread of activities that ONGC is doing. So you touched upon many aspects. So not just solar, wind, but you talked about geothermal energy as well. So it's a new form of energy. And you also briefly talked about the finance transition. And at this moment, we have the pleasure of having Arundhati ji, who in her earlier avatar was with the State Bank of India, the largest Indian bank, who knows anything and everything to do about finance. At the same time, she's now in Salesforce now, so she can talk to us about the digital transition as well. So the net zero transition, the ESG shift, everybody's talking about financing as one of the biggest things. And India at the moment, our budget for this year talked about green bonds being issued by the central government. the financing shift and the financing need is a very, very big one. At the same time, the electrical transition that we are going through needs technology. And the technology that is required is because our grid is now going to be digitized in a very big way. The other thing that we need, all organizations need, is good data. They need that data in terms of what is their carbon footprint, where do they generate it, what needs to be done about it. And not just that, you need the environmental data, you need the social data, you need data around governance. And you need to put that all together so that companies can take action. Arundhati ji, what are your thoughts in terms of all these multitude of things that need to come together to actually ensure that organizations are on the path to sustainability in more ways than one?
You're very right, Namrata, in the sense that sustainability is not a very small agenda. It's a very large agenda, starting from finance to research to actually getting stuff on the ground. If I talk about Salesforce today, and I would like to do that because currently I'm involved more with them rather than with the financing world. Salesforce has been on the sustainability transformation journey for over a decade. Our core values always has been trust, customer success, innovation, and equality. But I'm very proud to state that this year at the company kickoff in New York in February, we declared a new value, which is sustainability. So we have now added sustainability to our value. And we are also very proud to say that we are a net zero company as of 2021. And this is not only in respect of the carbon footprint of the servers and the computing capacity we use, but also secondary carbon footprint related to travel and everything else besides. So in order to build this climate action plan, we asked ourselves as a company 3 straightforward but essential questions. What do we do and why? So what should be our mission? What should be our products and services? The second question we asked is, how do we do it? Our operating model and value chain. How do we ensure that all of this is in alignment with this value of sustainability that we have? And the third question that we asked is, who do we influence? Is it our employees? Is it our customers? Is it society? So these are 3 fundamental questions I think that all businesses must ask themselves as they sculpt their respective climate action plans. We believe that business has the trust, resources, and potential to be the greatest platform for change. In fact, Mark Benioff, our founder, keeps talking about the fact that business must be the platform for change. So towards that end, we believe that companies must work to serve the interests of all their stakeholders, whether it be employees, customers, partners, communities, and most of all, the environment. It's been often said that we are borrowing from the future. And what are we leaving behind? We cannot leave a whole lot of debt for the future generations to repay. And therefore, creating this awareness about sustainability, ensuring that we have the right products in order to address the sustainability issues, that is what we would really like to bring to the table. You rightly said, there is a lot of data that is required. And we already have something called a sustainability cloud, which actually does a very good carbon accounting. But that is really not enough. So now we are transforming it to call it a net zero cloud. And I'm really very, very proud to say that this development of the sustainability cloud to the net zero cloud is actually getting delivered out of India. So it will be actually developed in Hyderabad and Bangalore, and it will be available to our customers so that they can understand the impact that they are having on the climate in very many ways. Again, not only for the carbon footprint, but in very many other ways, and try and ensure that they are doing the right thing in respect of their companies. In respect of our company, of course, we play a very meaningful part in trying and ensuring that we deliver a carbon neutral cloud to our customers, and that we achieve 100% renewable energy for our operations even as we go ahead. In fact, we've been also spearheading a number of other initiatives, including the planting of 1 trillion trees for the world. We've also recently, started looking at the Conscious Planet movement that Sadhguru has started for saving of soil. And he's very clear that, and I think he's right as well, that, with the kind of erosion of soil that we are seeing and the barrenness of the rate at which soil is becoming barren, in another 30 years, our food production will be down by 40%, whereas our population will be up, causing actually, a lot of social unrest, because the type of food and the supply of food that we are looking at will not remain the same. And therefore, time is really running out for us. We need to be very clear about advocating a consistent science-based climate policy. And we need to facilitate a just and equitable global transition as well. And that is where I think, the need for financing comes up. Because the question of financing, this world is one world. You cannot have a world where certain countries do excellently well and certain other countries don't, because we are all ultimately connected. Climate events don't go by boundaries of nations or countries. They go across the entire world. And if we are trying to do something that doesn't take the whole world into consideration, we are not doing enough. So I think those are the values that we are trying to impart to our employees. Also, survey after survey with our employees and with our young consumer group shows that they are extremely concerned about what our generation is doing in order to leave behind a sustainable world for them. And this is again a revelation for me, because again, in the finance industry, I used to work with a much more senior workforce where the awareness was low. But now that I work with a far junior workforce, junior in the sense of age, I find that their awareness and their concern is genuine and extremely well expressed. And therefore, we have a lot of allies in this war of ours to ensure that we leave behind a sustainable future. And towards that, whether it be through digital tools, whether it be through data gathering and making that available in easily consumable manner. And we have a company with us called Tableau in our group, which is one of the leading graphic data analytics company. And, they put down in graphs what you have to go through, a huge number of numbers to make out. So they do it in a very, very a visual manner, so as to bring home the impact of what we are doing very clearly. So with all of these, we expect that, we will be able to not only become totally net zero and remain so for the future, but we will be able to help our customers and our communities achieve the same goals in the future.
Thank you so much, ma'am. What I found fascinating when you just mentioned the fact that that climate is universal. It doesn't choose national boundaries to impact people. And that's the same thing we've seen in the pandemic, right? The climate and the pandemic are similar at many, many levels. And I want to just invite Ms. Suneeta Reddy to just talk to us a little bit about the fact that why does the world need a healthy environment, and how does it really impact humanity and everybody all around us? Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. I believe that the economy and the healthcare of every individual are inflexible, are interlinked. And I think this is a very vital understanding, because when I think of sustainability, and I think of sustainability not of just one country, but of all countries, the health of the individual is paramount. The way that we believe that our perception of sustainability is the ability to look at the gaps that exist in healthcare. And let me start with a small story. My father came back from the US and he lost a patient who couldn't make it to the US for a heart surgery in time. In the 1980s, 80% of all people requiring tertiary healthcare, whether it was cardiac or cancer, would go to the US or abroad for treatment. And I truly believe that for us, sustainability was about filling that gap in healthcare. And I think this has been amplified by COVID, the need for creating healthcare systems that would create something that was accessible by all consumers. And this was our journey. I think in creating the first corporate healthcare system, we were able to support the government in its endeavor to provide healthcare of international standards throughout the world. So there was a Harvard case study which said, emerging healthcare prices with world-class clinical outcomes, and truly that was part of our journey. And how did we achieve this journey? I think to become sustainable, we have to create value closer to the consumer. So if you take India as an example, 80% of India does not live in the urban cities where most of our healthcare facilities were present. For healthcare to be sustainable, we needed to move to tier 2, we needed to move to tier 3. And we did that in many ways. We did it through telemedicine. We established 1,000 telemedicine centers in India and across the world. We moved to smaller format institutions like clinics. We moved to small communities. And this is really important because, we took up a project which we call Total Health, because we felt that health was more than just biological health. It was also mental health. It was about creating jobs for women in those communities. It was really about looking at the welfare of communities and making communities sustainable. And in that journey, we transformed the life of 100,000 people, but that's a small step. I think a small step for us at Apollo, but the promise of something that we can do for the rest of the country. And clearly, sustainability is also the ability to look outside in. And what do I mean by outside in? As a company to be sustainable, I have to be able to satisfy the needs of my consumer, the patient first, our doctor. I have to be able to sustain the needs of our employees. We have 65,000 employees and 650,000 people who depend on this company for their welfare. I have to be sustainable for the bankers. And definitely, this would not be possible without capital. So sustainability for me is to take a holistic approach of all the stakeholders who invest into the well-being, into the health of our citizens, and provide them with the return that is fundamental and ensures sustainability for their own enterprise. So it's really an outside-in approach. It's a holistic approach to make sure that every organization that is part of the healthcare journey is supported and their sustainability is therefore ensured. And in the process, we see that the healthcare of the nation improves. And really, we do need to measure it. So in 1983, if you look at infant mortality, it was about 105 for every 1,000. Today, it's 35 for every 1,000. If you look at maternal mortality, it was 90. And now it is at 90 for every 1,000. And now it is at 30 for every 1,000. So clearly, we have measurable statistics to show that as a healthcare enterprise, we are sustainable and we can continue to be sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suneeta. Taking the topic of health, it's so critical to all of us, and most of us living in North India see the smog that covers the entire north, and we suffer from it. And Naveen and I have spoken about it earlier, and we really believe that electric vehicles could solve some of the problem, if not a lot of it. Naveen, what are your thoughts on this? Are sustainable products and services the answer to creating a healthier, better and greener world?
Namrata, thank you. That's a very pertinent question. It's a pleasure being here today. So, when we look at it from a global perspective and when we look at it from a climatic perspective, there's obviously, got to be a global goal in place to say that, by when are we really how are we going to control the emissions that we've got at a global level? And then we funnel it down, we drill it down into countries, and then from the countries it goes down into cities, and cities it goes down into urban planning and so on and therefore. And then it goes down to companies and individuals. Now, here we actually have two problems. One, of course, is a climatic issue here with what we're talking about. But in the north, we have an issue with which we have to deal with, which is pollution as well. Now, that's something we can't wish away like this. So there has got to be strong goals which come into place, which address it from a climatic standpoint and also from a pollution standpoint. And we've already seen, when you look at the PM 2.5 emissions, for example, in this part of the country, and as is anywhere else, and that with the COVID virus is a deadly combination for the lungs. It's not a great combination. It's a deadly cocktail. So sustainability is going to play a very, very important role. Now, this comes in from both climatic perspective and from an environment perspective. And here we've got to deal with both here. Now, we do have options as an urban commuter, as an urban person, as a person living in an urban environment. A large part of our urban issue actually is to do with pollution, which emits out of transportation. So transportation is one of the larger emitters of pollution in urban environment, which we need to start controlling. Now, there are options which are available for us. A number of countries, a number of cities have done it pretty effectively, where they've used both restrictive measures and also support. In India, we've got, from a governmental standpoint, there is a strong support which is in place. So we've got strong policies. There are strong tailwinds which are pushing us forward, which are propelling this whole thing forward. To go to a space, so at a central level, we've got policies. We had FAME 1, now we've got FAME 2. Then we've got a number of state governments where we've got, again, policies in place. While we look at acceleration, there are certain projections in mind when we look at in place which talk about how quickly are we going to convert towards electric and zero emission vehicles. Now, when you look at that, the numbers, there needs to be a goal that sets in place. There needs to be a final goal to say that by this date, we are going to have a cutoff date. For example, when we look at net zero for our country, there is a goal in place. 2070, we want to be net zero. Now, when you start working backwards from there, there are going to be factors which are to do with power generation. There are going to be factors to do with emissions. And then there are vehicle emissions. When we start looking at vehicle emissions, our projections are that in the next few years, by 2025 to 26, we are going to see a conversion of anything from 30 to 50% of the market in the two-wheeler space. And it's a different categories, different vehicles will start off or will take off at a different stage in their whole life cycle. And the base of that pyramid is going to be the two-wheeler sector, simply because India rides on two-wheelers. 80% of the vehicles are two-wheelers. And that's where the commuters are. So whether we burn fuel, whether it comes from a two-wheeler or it comes from a car, each liter of fuel burned produces the same amount of carbon emissions that are pumped back into the air. So it is absolutely imperative for us to actually start controlling that from now on. We are already a little bit behind, but nevertheless, it's never too late to start. So there are certain factors which are going to accelerate adoption. One, of course, is the cutoff date, which is the final date. The second is a factor, which is a very important one, is financing for these vehicles. Now, we know that electric vehicles, when it comes to it per se, are more expensive than their IC engine counterparts for the similar performance. While that's the case, that can be controlled in the total cost of ownership is much lower. So financing for these vehicles becomes a very, very important factor. Priority lending for electric vehicles becomes a very important factor. TCO is already lower, and that gap is widening in favor of electric vehicles simply because the increase in fuel prices that we've already seen, and we are going to see more increases coming in on account of what's happening in the world right now. When we look at the policies, all policies need to be pointing in one direction. And that one direction right now is that we have to reduce our carbon emissions at a countrywide level. And that includes your automotive, that includes your industry, that includes every building, and it includes everything else that comes in. We've got a number of PLIs which are already in place. We've got reskilling of the workforce, which is going to happen. So while it's very good for us to have these goals, it's very good, these policies, they need to be commercially viable as well. And that is where ESG actually will take off in a much more effective manner. So one is restrictive, and the second one is to make them commercially viable. And then, of course, we've got the problem which is at the urban level. And then we've got the climate and the pollution which comes into play. So we believe that going forward, there is a very, very important role that we have to play as organizations, as individuals, as cities, as urban town planners, etc., in our commutes that we do on a day-to-day basis. And how are we really commuting? Public transport, electric vehicles, these are some of the forms by which we can actually start reducing our carbon footprint. And that's going to be imperative for us to go forward.
Thank you so much, Naveen. So, we've had a very interesting series of discussions with Alka, Arundhati, Jamshyd, Suneeta, and Naveen. And with each person bringing in new highlights, new important things that they want to talk about. We do need goals. There is no moving ahead without targets, without goals, but ultimately it's about action. So what is it that the business leaders of today are going to do in their organizations? How will they transform their products and services? How will governments act beyond the strong the declarations that have been made? Are we going to follow that through with policy? Are we going to follow that through with measurement? Are we going to transform our ecosystem in a positive way? Much remains to be seen. And I really hope that, by 2030, we can look back and say, we did it. Thank you so much for all your time.